So the title of this discussion is When Ordinary Becomes Extraordinary. It's hard to call any of these four individuals ordinary, especially when you see what they've accomplished in their athletic endeavors. And we'll poke into that and try to understand some of the secrets of their success and how some of that extraordinary ambition and intensity may pay off in other ways as well. So thank you all for being here, and thanks to the Milken Institute for allowing us to have this hopefully very interesting session. My name is Gene Sykes, and the reason I'm associated with this group is that I'm the CEO of the bid committee that is attempting to bring the Olympic and Paralympic Games back to Los Angeles in 2024. So we'll have a few things to say about that near the end of the panel discussion. But let's talk first about why we're all so interested in the Olympics and the Paralympics. What are the individuals like that we love to see compete and that we share things with as they show the incredible intensity and focus of their efforts? So thank you all for being here. It's great to have a chance to chat with you. So the first thing I'd want to ask you all is to share with all of us, when was it as a child that you said, I'm going to become an Olympic or Paralympic athlete? If you recall the moment, if you recall what it was that motivated you and how you said, this is what I'm going to go for, the first time you really seriously thought about it. Allyson?
Well, for me, I don't think I had that moment until somewhere in high school. When I started out, I may not have had the most traditional start that a lot of Olympic athletes have, because I didn't find my sport until later. But what I did have and what I did know was I was super competitive. And it didn't matter what it was, whether it was just, backyard games or racing my brother on the street, whatever it was, I wanted to win. And I was kind of in his shadow. And so I had a very normal upbringing, very active in my community, very active in my neighborhood. And it wasn't until high school that I found, the organized track and field and came to find that I had a passion for it. So once I did come to it, it was somewhere probably junior or senior year where I thought, wow, this could be a career. I could actually go to the Olympics, and this is really a whole thing. And at that point, that's when I had to make the decision to be dedicated and all of that. But high school was really where track and field came alive to me.
That's rather late. A lot of people start earlier than that.
Much, much earlier. So I'm grateful that I found my sport. And I think it's great to be able to do all sports and be able to find, what you really are interested in.
Apolo?
I found my sport, I think like many other people who've kind of watched Olympic Games. I watched the Olympic Games with my father. 1992 and then 1994, I saw short track speed skating on television. I had no idea what it was. I wanted to play traditional stick and ball sports that we have in America, football, basketball, baseball. My dad said no to football. I asked if I could be a boxer. He said no to boxing. Swimming lasted very short, but I had a lot of love for it. And then I saw this crazy sport on television in 1994. I asked my father if I should try this sport out. And that's really how my career began. So I would say a lot of athletes kind of see their sport or see their idols or mentors, and then that kind of is that whatever ignites something within them. And I started out purely as fun. I had a natural raw talent for the sport, picked it up very quickly. And then at the age of 14, I moved away from home in Seattle to Lake Placid, New York, to train under the Junior Development Training Program. And that's how my career began. But intrinsically in my mind, I didn't really know what it meant to make an Olympic team, probably until I was 16, 17 years old. And then I realized that I had the talent, I had the skill set, and putting those pieces together was the next step.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think my story might be a little different because I grew up with a disability, and when I first saw the Olympics on TV, I saw the Olympics. The Paralympics weren't on TV at the time, so I remember watching the 1984 games and watching Joan Benoit Samuelson run in the marathon. I grew up in a household of runners, so we were big running fans. And watching the games, but nobody on TV looked like me. They weren't wearing prosthetic legs, so though I loved watching the Olympics, I didn't realize that I actually had an opportunity to be on the U.S. team and be part of the Olympic celebration and the Paralympics. Yeah, so it wasn't until I was 11 years old that I met another athlete with a disability, and then she told me about the Paralympics. And that week, I went to school that week, and I wrote an essay in my 6th grade class, how one day I was going to go to the Paralympics and represent the United States. And that's really where my dream began, was meeting another mentor that made me believe that I could be an athlete too.
Janet?
Well, I grew up here in Southern California, and I was a little swimmer, and I think a lot of kids grow up swimming in Southern California, and everyone used to make fun of me because I had this funny stroke, and I was really skinny and little, and I was a good swimmer. I wasn't, a prodigy by any means, but all of that changed in '84 when we went to opening ceremonies of the games at the Memorial Coliseum, and I remember it was this visceral reaction I had to watching, Rayford Johnson run out with the torch, and I remember thinking, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do everything in my power to do it. And I went back to my coach. I was 12, and I told him I was going to swim in the next Olympics, and he laughed at me because he said I was too little, but he said if I could focus and work hard like all of these great athletes here know, that potentially I could do it, and that's my story. But I was certainly, I think, a legacy of the '84 games by virtue of watching it and wanting to be like those great athletes like Joan and Jackie and Carl. And Greg, yeah.
So all of you as teenagers, more or less, determined you could be Olympic athletes and potentially Olympic champions, which is an incredible goal. What about doubt? What about, thinking you couldn't do it or it wouldn't work? How soon did that come about, and how did you deal with it as kids, as young athletes, before you went to your first Olympics? Go ahead.
Well, for me, I think that's the great thing about being a kid. I really did believe you could kind of do anything. And also just having support. I know that I really trusted in what my coach said. And when he said that he believed in me, I didn't feel like there was any reason why I couldn't accomplish it. And at the time, I don't think it seemed as big of a goal as it really was, looking back at it. But I think it's all about breaking it down. When you have a plan, it's much easier to accomplish, and it's more simplified. And so just kind of taking it year by year and focusing on the things that I could right away, and just knowing that I have help to accomplish this really, really big goal. And so I think that was what really worked for me, the support and knowing that I wasn't really in it alone.
Yeah, I think doubt is a natural human psychological response to anything that's significantly challenging. When you're a kid, you lack, I think, that failure mechanism, and so you haven't tasted the pain, the hurt, training for 4 years and then not reaching your goal. You don't know what that's like yet. So in your eyes, for me, I was 14, I was like, I don't see why I can't beat these guys who've been training for 15 years. Seems pretty simple, I just got to skate faster. And it was just quite simple. And then kind of the longer I stayed in the sport, the more success and the more failures I had, the more difficult it began to block out or, dissolve that secondary voice that's on your shoulder that says you're too old, you're getting tired, you're fatigued, do you want it bad enough? Maybe these other athletes are younger, stronger, better, faster than you. How do you overcome those things? So I think when you're younger, it's more of a physical challenge, and the older you get, the more psychologically in tune you need to be with both yourself and I think your environment. And that to me was, I think, the biggest challenge, is dealing with those inside voices. There was many great athletes, I think, in any sport, but the biggest competitor and the biggest challenge I personally ever faced was always myself. And once I was able to quiet that voice and stay in line with the goals and paths that I had, that's when I reached the greatest level of success in my sport.
Yeah, of course, as Apolo said, we all have that inner dialogue of doubt. And I was no different. I think especially since on paper, being a girl that was not even 5 foot tall with one leg, on paper I had a reason to have a lot of doubt. What made me think that with one leg I could run faster than all the other girls in the world, but I believed that. But I think because I had other people constantly doubting me, that helped me strengthen my inner doubt muscle, like to be stronger than that doubt. But I had so many people in my childhood, and I also grew up in a time when disability wasn't as we see it today, So I actually had coaches. I had a soccer coach as a kid that wouldn't let me play with the other kids because of my disability. Because I was disabled, he would make me kick the soccer ball and go kick the ball against the side of the wall by myself and wouldn't let me play with the other kids. So I was constantly being fed doubt from the adults. But I think that kind of fired me up because I was like, don't underestimate me. Don't doubt me. I'm going to show you what I can do. So doubt actually fed me a lot of fire in the belly to prove the world wrong, to not underestimate this little girl with one leg. Watch what I can do. So doubt was a good motivator for me.
Janet?
I get the hard job at the end to just say whatever they said because it's all correct. And, as I think back on my career, my best Olympics was my first Olympics. I turned 17 the week before they began, and I swam against the East Germans, who were a foot taller than me and, like 80 pounds heavier than me. And we all kind of know, the history there. And when I was young, I didn't think about it, and I thought the same as Apolo or Sarah, Well, I don't care if they're bigger, stronger, and faster than me and dominant. It doesn't matter. I'm 17 years old, and I can get out there, and I can do just as well as them and beat them, which I was able to do. I think part of it, too, when we talk about doubts, is also your critics. I made a comeback at 38, and I swam in my final Olympic trials at 40. I had 2 young children at the time, and I had a lot of people criticize me, a lot of people tell me I was tarnishing my legacy, a lot of people telling me I should be home with my babies, and I found that at 40, I had the fortitude to deal with those critics, and it didn't matter what people said to me. I think the crazier our ideas are and the wild things we try to do, that's what ultimately makes us successful. But in my 20s, after my first Olympics, when I was determined, and at 40, when I didn't care what my critics said, in my mid-20s, in my middle, time of being an Olympian, I listened to those critics, and I took those to heart, and I internalized them, and people would say, oh, you're 24, you're too old, oh, you're not breaking records anymore, and I believed that. So a lot of it is internal doubt, but some of that is brought on by external forces, and I think real champions and people that continue to succeed in the face of whatever they're trying to do don't listen to those critics. They just continue in their belief and what they believe is the right thing, and they persevere on, and at the end of the day, that's what's going to make you whole and successful.
Well, you touch on a really interesting theme. All 4 of you have had exceptionally long athletic careers as competitive athletes, and then in some cases moved into other careers after that, which are also intensely competitive, with Apolo as a first-rate dancer on television, for example. But talk about, I think, Janet, you just made reference to the fact how different it was to be a gold medal winning teenager versus somebody who's a much more mature athlete.
Yeah.
I know, Allyson, we've talked about the training that you do today relative to what you trained like when you were 10 years younger. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about being, if you will, a mature athlete, mature competitive athlete. And anyone can go for this, so I won't keep to the sequence. Sarah, you can start.
Part of why I chose, and after I competed in the Paralympics in 1992, and then I started to get into Ironman triathlons, and part of why I chose that is because it's a sport you can do well into your 80s and 90s. I train with a woman in Orange County. She's in her 80s, and she's training for another Ironman. And so I think we all come from a sport background, but I think all of us can speak to the importance of cross-training. And that's one of the things I love about our sport of triathlon is that you're cross-training. You're always using different muscles. But I did have this idea that I love sport and I want to be an athlete for a long time. And I thought you can swim when you're in your 90s, and you can still ride a bike when you're in your 80s and 90s. And so that's why I switched to that sport. And still in my 40s, I'm competitive in triathlons, and I'm still racing in marathons around the world, and I credit that to being a cross-training athlete.
Do you train the same way? Or what have you learned about training since you were a young kid competing?
You got to train smarter, not harder. Recovery is just as important as your training days. And actually, I hired one of the women I train with. She's another Olympic athlete. Her name's McKeely Jones, and she's also in her 40s. She's the Olympic silver medalist for the triathlon in the Olympics. She won the silver in the in triathlon, and she actually just won a gold medal. She went back to the games. She won the medal for the Olympics Olympics in 2000. She went back in 2016 as a guide for a Paralympic blind athlete from Australia. So she competed in the games again, this time as being the eyes for a blind athlete, and now won a gold medal. And so she's older than I am, so she's further on into those 40s. I won't reveal her age. You can Google that. But I love, too, that even in her late 40s, she's still competing at a gold medal performance level. And so age really is just a number. And so you don't have to, that's also what I love about triathlon, is that any person, you don't have to wait for your Olympics. You can sign up for a triathlon in Malibu or here in LA. You can find your own sporting moment and find your gold medal moment, even if you think you're too old for the Olympics.
Just one more reason why LA is the Olympic city, correct?
Absolutely. Triathlon was born here in Southern California, and we need to bring the games back here to this great city.
So before we started, Apolo and Allyson were having a very interesting discussion with each other about training and training as a mature athlete and the use of technology and what you tried and what you learned. Sure. Just chat a bit about that.
Well, yeah, I think Allyson and I were just talking about kind of the beginning of the career towards kind of the latter years of the career. When I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, I could do push-ups and my legs would get stronger. That's just by nature of growing as an athlete, and your body's ability to adapt and handle massive loads of training was irreplaceable at that time. But now with the rise of quantitative analytics and data and information and recovery and technology in association with how we train, more is not better. If you're not recovering, you can only train as hard and as fast as you can recover from the previous training cycle. And there's so many specific modalities in terms of tracking your sleep, your behavior, your psychological well-being, your heart rate. I mean, all these different elements play a role. And when you're talking about a race that lasts, less than 60 seconds long, every single second of your day really, really counts in terms of when do you eat, when do you fuel, what are you fueling with? And so the human body and the mind are working cohesively to create the best possible chance of success compounded over a 4-year period. And, most of the general public only gets to see us once every 4 years, but we're training every day. I mean, every year, every day we've got competitions, and using that data to our advantage when you're older is a huge part of it. I trained personally the hardest I ever trained in the final 2 years of my career, but probably I was overtrained for 80+% of my entire career, and I stepped on the ice at every Olympic Games. Was most likely I was somewhere between the range of 80 to 90% of what I could be, just simply because the natural, internal desire to want to push more and do more when that's not always the best thing. And that's where your coaches, your advisors, and then data, pure raw information that you're getting, whether it's through blood panel tests, whether it's through hormone levels, and seeing how your body is reacting to the training. So, we see athletes now who are really literally doing superhuman feats. And I mean, for those of you who have not seen Allyson run, I have personally seen her train and seen her run live, and it's like a beautiful thing to watch. And so when you think about a human being and that body in motion, it's so difficult to realize how many hours both raw genetic talent coupled with the intrinsic mental desire and psychological long-term well-being of being at that level for so many years and then displaying in a way that's so incredible. And so that's why, I love sports for all the reasons involved. And, I think today is a no better time than to be an athlete, because you've got so many incredible tools at your fingertips. And just because you genetically are not the most talented, you can do and really advance your way through technology to be a great athlete. And so the 2024 games will be unlike any games in the history of the world, and it'll spawn a generation of athletes intellectually and physically that we have never seen before. And so it's going to be very, very exciting. Yeah, that's kind of what we were talking about. Sorry, Allyson.
That's good.
Yeah, and I was telling Apolo that that's kind of where I am right now in my career, and I think it's so great that we have all this information now and that we are able to apply it. I think as athletes, it is probably the hardest thing, though, to think about backing off of your training and thinking about, okay, recovery is more important. Let me take an extra day, because it's just not what naturally we are taught to do. But it does make so much difference. So now as I look at the next 4 years and I prepare my training, I am looking at, okay, I need to be more selective in my racing. I need to take more days of recovery. I need to be able to train at a higher level and not so much the quantity. So it is very, very different, but it is so much more effective and definitely difficult for athletes to accept, but it definitely works.
So you all compete in Olympic or Paralympic sports, and you're in sports which sort of reach their highest state in the Olympics. And they never get as much profile as they do during the Olympic or Paralympic Games. What does it mean to compete in the Olympics as opposed to competing in a World Cup or World Championship, or even a very, very intense track and field competition, or a short track speed skating competition, or any sort of a swimming competition? How does the Olympics change the way you think about what you're doing?
Well, for me, it didn't, and I think many athletes might agree with that, because I think it's one of the reasons I did well at my first Olympics when I was barely 17, because to me it was just another swim meet. You're standing on the starting blocks with 2 East Germans on either side, or your competitors, and if you start to think, oh my gosh, I'm at the Olympics and there's 500 million people watching on television and an NBC camera in my face and media and all of this, you actually, it messes with you. So for me, I treated, every big swim meet the exact same. To me, it was just another swim meet. I was going to get out there and I was going to execute on exactly what I'd trained for and practiced for. And for me, that was how I dealt with it and blocked everything else out. And I love watching the athletes at the Olympics, and you see someone like Allyson on the track and there's the NBC camera like right there, or Michael Phelps on the blocks. And I know that feeling, and it takes strong mental fortitude to ignore it and not think about it and completely focus. When I talk to young people and young children, I tell them, that feeling when you're a kid or in high school and college and a professor passes out an exam and you've studied and your roommate hasn't, and you're like, yes, you kind of flip through it and you're like, this is the easiest thing ever, I got this, and your friend next to you is pulling out her hair because she didn't study. Well, that's what it's like being on the starting blocks at any major competition. If you've done your homework, if you've gone to practice, if you've done the right things, you get up there and you just do what you've trained to do. And then if you're not prepared, that's when all the other stuff starts to worry you. So for me, it was all the same.
Olympics versus a World Championship. Allyson?
Well, I definitely do agree with Janet, but I think as you get older, it does become different. I remember my first Olympics and being 18 years old, and just like Janet said, kind of, you treat it the same. But then as you keep continuing, you have more responsibilities and you have expectations, and it's not just you're doing this for fun, but now this is your job. And so there is a different approach for sure. And I think that's when that mental toughness has to go to the next level. You have to be so dialed in that all of these outside influences are not distracting you. And so it essentially is the same, but so much different, because it's such a huge, huge stage. And that everyone back home is rooting for you and wanting you to do well. And also the sense of pride that you feel to represent your country. I think that is huge, knowing that that you have so much support. You just want to make everyone proud. And so kind of trying to wrap that all together and make sure you're also focused in a race that's, somewhere around under a minute or, 21 seconds. It can be difficult, but it's all about that mental toughness.
Apolo?
I definitely agree with kind of Janet in saying that you treat every competition the same, and that kind of depressurizes the current situation scenario. However, the reality is there's nothing like the Olympic Games. No matter what world championships I train at or compete at, there's not a billion people watching. There's not cameras in your face, and this could be the single most life-changing event to occur ever in your life. So I think it's very human to realize and understand those things, and also you have trained 4 to 8 to 12 years of your life for this particular event of 40 seconds for me at absolute perfection, in which I have to be perfect on this day. I have to be rested. I can't be sick. I can't have equipment failures. There's a lot of variables that are out of my control, and I'm trying to beat the rest of the top 1% from around the world who've also done the same thing. And mental toughness is a huge component of that. So all these different variables that are always changing and things that I can't control, and that's where I think internalizing that and getting into that peak state and that flow state, which I think is being focused on so much more now, whether you're an athlete or you're a businessman, whether you're a politician or you're a school teacher, it doesn't matter. I think, the mind is so incredibly powerful, and that was always my greatest tool throughout the sport. And when I was the most successful, when I was winning and it seemed so easy, is when mentally I was also the most in tune with my body. And so, like, straight out of the Matrix, when Neo was like bent over and like dodging these bullets, that's how my races felt at my best. They were very easy, everything was an automatic, and everything was significantly slowed down, almost in slow motion, but I could react, I could move, I felt like I could almost control how the other athletes were leading. Even though I was in 4th place, I felt like I was in 1st. And so, the Olympic Games allowed me to reach that heightened state of sensitivity mentally. And I think all studies and data are showing that, if you want significant challenge, pressure makes diamonds. And we hear it time and time again. And without pressure, you can't make diamonds, right? And so the same thing with, I think, sport is you see great things happen or things that are somewhat unexplainable during these times of which an athlete is pushed against a wall at its last final opportunity to create success. And to me, I've won world championships, I was able to win World Cup medals, but there was nothing that I could replace the Olympic Games because we place so much importance on it in a society, and because it's just not televised. Like, no one's watching my, world championships in, Sofia, Bulgaria with like 1,300 people there versus 1.3 billion people watching track and field. So it's a different experience, and that's the beauty thing about the Olympic Games is, the athletes are not doing it for the money. They're not doing it for the fame. They're really doing it because they truly are seeking, I think, personal glory and personal adaptation to those stresses and being in that flow state, which we're so addicted to time and time again, and reaching that never-ending story of perfection, which is impossible, but you're always striving for it. The Olympic Games is that platform.
So the other thing about the Olympic Games is you're all members of Team USA. And it's a bigger team than any other team that you race with or participate on. What does it feel like in the Olympic Games to be part of Team USA and, to be famous or well-known and have a lot of the hopes of the team and the country rest on your shoulders? Janet, you could take that one first.
The oldest stateswoman. I keep talking about my first Olympics, but it was in 1988, and it was the last Olympics of the Cold War. And in 1986, my first trip outside of the country as a 14-year-old was to Moscow. My mom said she cried every night that I was gone, and I think I did too. So for me, on a very early age, because many of my competitions were behind the Iron Curtain, I got a very distinct sense, being a kid growing up in Orange County, and then being a kid that traveled to, to East Germany 2 weeks out of the year, and then Moscow, to understand what opportunities I was given to be raised and have the opportunity to train in this country, to be an athlete for this country. And so for me, going to my first Olympics and seeing, the CCCP sweats and the DDR sweats and feeling that palpable sense of us versus them really impacted me, and it continued to impact me through my entire career. It was the most amazing experience to represent my country, and I always appreciated, I think, more so than, even younger athletes, because of that differentiation of traveling a lot behind the Iron Curtain, how fortunate and blessed I was to represent the United States and have the training opportunities I had here, and just to represent Team USA always meant so much to me.
Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I always felt so much pride as an American to get to represent my country, but I also think kind of wearing this Paralympic hat also allowed me to realize how America has been such a leader in the sports space, but also using sports to create change in our world and how we think about people with disabilities. Also thinking about the type of technology that we have. I mean, America has been a great space where we've had innovation that has helped people with disabilities even become athletes. I wear a running foot called the Flex Run. I would never be able to even attempt to run in a Paralympic race or an Ironman without getting access to that running foot. And I'm very lucky to come from the United States where we have access to the technology. We're getting better where the technology is more accessible to people around the world. But that's one of the things that we sort of export through sport is this cultural idea and these shifts in ideas by opening up the world. And I think that's what we've done with the Paralympics and the Olympics Games. We've changed the way we see people with disabilities. We see them as athletes, as powerful. And so when I talk about pride as being an American athlete, I'm also very proud to be an American woman with a disability that serves as an advocate and as an ambassador to the world about what it means to be disabled in the larger global community.
Apolo, how about being in a milieu where you have people from all around the world, many from different cultures, and you're the representative from the United States? How do you think about that? What have you learned about the rest of the world from competing in the Olympic Games?
Well, I think that the Olympic Games are unique in that component where you've got all these different athletes from around the world who they don't have political agenda. They're there for the purity of sport, and that's the beautiful thing. And I think that, for me, representing the United States, I was always very proud. There was always added pressure to hold myself to the highest degree, whether I was in the field of play or off the field of play. So how I won and how I lost were equally important. And I think it was an incredible experience. I had massive rivalries in my career, mainly with the South Koreans. And so my relationship with that country has been ongoing for like 20 years. I have business in Korea now, so things have definitely made a turn. But at one point, I was the second most hated person in South Korea. Number one, it was Osama bin Laden. So it was like a real, true, difficult time for me. I didn't go to the country for like 3 years, but there's 3 World Cups every year there. And so it was difficult. But I was always very, very proud to kind of represent the United States. And I felt like, as naive as I was as a kid, that no matter if there was a better or faster athlete, for some reason, because I was American, means I wanted it more, And I think that's, wherever that fairy tale comes from, whether through cartoons or comic book, it was kind of built within me. So the experience itself of having a global platform to compete and interact with so many different cultures and people competing in the same sport or a variety of different sports is beautiful. And, now when I go to broadcast for the Olympic Games, summer or winter, I have a different perspective of my viewpoint on sports and on people and in cultures, and it's a really beautiful thing. And I see the difference in how they treat their athletes and how they talk to their athletes and how they communicate, how they train, how they represent, how they handle winning and losing. It's all different, and that's the beauty of this planet that we live on is we're all so different, but at that one period of time, once for 2 weeks, once every 4 years, the world comes together, and I think they embrace this Olympic culture, which is so powerful, and it crosses colors, boundaries, expectations, and we've seen it involved in many political scenarios, but I think now we're advancing to kind of have become this very inclusive group, whether it's Paralympic, whether it's Special Olympic, whether it's the Olympic. It's a really amazing and special and beautiful thing, and I was always very, very proud to represent the flag.
So Allyson, tell us, what is it like to be in the Olympic Village with the world's fastest or strongest or best at what they do from all over the world in every different sport? How does that feel, and how do you get along with people you've never met before, but are at that elite level?
Well, it's a pretty incredible experience. I would have to say it's one of my favorite things because coming from track and field, which is essentially an individual sport, it is really amazing to have teammates, to be a part of Team USA. And I know one of my favorite things that happens in the village is track and field is the second week, and so usually you're trying to stay off your legs and you're just kind of lounging around. And so we have these different lounges, and when our teammates compete, we all come together to watch. And it's the coolest thing because you are just cheering on your teammates, and whether it's basketball or gymnastics or swimming, and you're just so excited to be there with one another, and you really do feel like a team. And that's the first time we really come together to support each other. And I remember just in Rio having that same experience, being the second week again and kind of sitting back, and it was the coolest thing because the women were doing such an outstanding job. And it's not only the kids at home who are being inspired, we're also still being inspired. So I remember sitting back and watching Simone in gymnastics do her thing. And it was just kind of time after time the women were just kind of performing, and I just couldn't wait to have my opportunity. So it's really, really cool to be a part of that team, and especially when you get over there and you get to come together and actually sit down with one another and support each other. It's a really special thing.
Have you and Simone become pals?
We definitely got to support each other, yeah. And throughout those 2 weeks, it was really cool to walk through the village and, see them coming through and kind of just give a word of encouragement as we're each going out to our different competitions.
Janet, describe your best Olympic moment.
I will say that Allyson forgot to mention the crazy swimmers when we're finished the first week, and you have to keep telling us to be quiet as we, we finally get our heads out of the water and we get to actually talk to people. My greatest experience came in '96. I swam in '88, '92, '96. Won medals in '88, won medals in '92, was at the tail end of my, first career in '96. Was trying to figure it all out, was trying to understand the meaning of winning, what it meant to win a gold medal, where it fit in my life, what I could do with that as I contemplated retirement from the sport of swimming. And I received a call from Billy Payne, who was the Gene Sykes and the Casey Wasserman of the Atlanta bid and was a very good friend of mine, asking me to run the torch at opening ceremonies. And he told me I would be the second to last person and the final woman. And swimmers don't go to opening ceremonies. And to be honest, I thought the Olympics were about winning. And I wanted to go to Atlanta and I wanted to win. And I actually said to Billy, I said, well, Billy, I don't go to opening ceremonies. I'm going to swim and I'm going to win. And I don't run. I'm not going to fall in a stadium with a lit flame in front of 1 billion people. And Billy Payne said to me, Janet, if you do this, it'll be the greatest moment of your Olympic career. And I didn't believe him. And I remember thinking, well, frankly, he's clearly never won a gold medal, because that's the greatest moment of your Olympic career, of course. And he was a very convincing man, Billy. And he worked hard over that phone call, and he convinced me. And on the day of opening ceremony, I was taken by a Georgia State trooper to the stadium. It was my first opening ceremonies as an athlete, and I'd never stood on the infield because I always swam the next day, and I got pushed out literally through a tunnel onto this track, and it was dark, and there were 10,000 athletes standing in the infield, and I'll never forget, I really didn't know what to do. I was very out of my element. I was totally horrified, and Evander Holyfield came running to me, and I thought, what have I gotten myself into? And I started running, and I had to run halfway around the track and up 3 long ramps. And I remember for the first dozen steps, I thought a lot about myself and falling and lighting my hair on fire and just, all into myself. And then I looked to my left, and I'll never forget, there were all of the athletes, all of you guys, and they were there. And as I ran with this torch slowly, especially for you, Allyson, very slowly, the athletes were moving as much as they could with this torch. And they were all, gazing at this Olympic flame. And for the first time, after 3 Olympic villages, I saw these athletes. I was always there to eat my dinner, to go to the training room, to go to the pool, to win my medals, But this was the first time I actually thought about the other athletes. And I saw the table tennis player from Mongolia, and I saw the badminton player from Tunisia. And I realized, that only 10% of the athletes that compete in the Olympic and Paralympic Games ever win medals. And I realized that most of the people at the Olympics and Paralympics go there for the glory of the Games, for the glory of their country and their families and their friends. And that was my moment. And that's when I realized why we do this. And it's not to win, it's to inspire generations and young people and inspire all of us to be the best we can be. And then I got up the top of that ramp, and Muhammad Ali was standing there. And I think we all know the rest of the story. So certainly, hands down, my greatest moment. I'm sorry to talk so long, but I always tell people I'd give up. It was only a few seconds, but I would give up every medal to do it again. It was incredible. Yeah, thank you.
Great story. I have to ask the other 3 of you, though, for your most memorable, your favorite Olympic moment. Could be about you or something else in the Olympics, Allyson, or Paralympics.
Well, I don't want to go after Janet with that amazing story, but mine's kind of a different approach. It was actually that same games, and at the time, I was not an athlete at all in '96, and I remember sitting down. My grandma lived with us at the time, and when the Olympics came on, we would go into her room and watch as a family. And so I remember doing that, and Dominique Dawes was competing that night. And I was just fascinated. You know, she performed, and it was amazing. And I had no connection to the sport of gymnastics or any sport for that matter at that time, but it just captivated me. And I remember feeling so inspired. And I had no clue that I would go on to be an athlete or anything of that nature, but just feeling like, wow, maybe one day I could do something special. And I think that that is the amazing thing about the Olympics. You know, when you're watching, or when little kids are watching, they're not necessarily thinking about athletics, but about being inspired about anything and that they can do it. And I remember that night specifically, and it's really funny to think back and the things that I've been able to accomplish. And it all kind of started with that one special moment. So that's what really stuck out to me.
Sarah, do you have a best Paralympic or Olympic memory?
Yeah, well, I have to say I'm the only one on this stage that hasn't won an Olympic or Paralympic medal. And I have to say, I have no shame in that, but I say that because I think one of my greatest moments in the Paralympics was actually failing, of not winning that medal. Like it was an incredible life lesson to learn to work towards something. And I was the world record holder going into this race. And I got to the Barcelona Games and I thought, okay, I'm here to collect my medal. I'm the world record holder. And I tripped coming out of the starting blocks and didn't even move on to finals. So although it was like this disappointing thing, it was this moment that sport still taught me all these lessons along the way that I've still taken from me. And sport has continued to be this profound impact on my life. So, but unlike a lot of people on stage, my highlight of the Olympics was actually failing. Of course, I remember the opening ceremony was a great moment, but I was still so proud of the fact that I got to the games, that I made it to the Olympics, and no matter what, even if I don't have the medal, no one can ever take that title away from me, that I'm a Paralympian. I've gone to the games. So a different take on it, but still a highlight, even though it might be perceived as a low light.
Interesting. Apolo?
Every games for me was amazing. To highlight one was probably at the tail end of my career. Having competed in 2002, technically at home games on home soil in Salt Lake City, and then I grew up in Seattle, so my final Olympic Games was actually in Vancouver, BC, which was like 2.5 hours from the house I grew up in, which felt very much like a North American Games and kind of like an American Games since Vancouver is so close to home. And it was, every games, every medal, every race had its own special place in terms of memory ingrained into my soul and my being. And I think just being able to kind of walk away from those 2010 games feeling completely exhausted of any ability to leave no stone unturned in my preparation was the single most fulfilling thing I had. Whether I won or lost was kind of insignificant. It was really that preparation stage leading up to those games and those life lessons that I learned about not only myself, but about other competitors and other people and cultures, my coaches, my friends, family, teammates. All these things kind of combined into one was the most special. And then, every year that goes by, the more and more I miss those moments of kind of simplicity, right? Where you wake up and your sole purpose in life seems to be wrapped around becoming faster, better, stronger in some capacity. And that's all that mattered to me at that time. And I love it, and I cherish it, and it's a special thing. So I was very blessed to be able to experience a long career in my life and share it with so many people and have a great team to support, the dreams of representing the United States and trying to win medals. But every games is really special, and for sure, I think my final games was the best because it was an amalgamation of all these efforts, all these naysayers and all the critics saying you couldn't do something, and then kind of proving it to yourself that you can go above and beyond what you previously thought was possible. And there's something very powerful in that.
Well, you've all participated in multiple Olympic or Paralympic games. You've seen a lot of sports. Tell me, which sport would you love to compete in that you've never competed in and you never tried to compete in, but you saw it enough that you saw what it meant to be a successful athlete in that sport?
Track and
Janet?
field.
Oh, really?
For sure. I would have loved to have been a track and field athlete, but I'm very slow. 40 meters and then my speed goes way down.
It's hard to believe.
For me, I tried gymnastics when I was little, and I was horrible. And every time I see Nadia, she laughs at me, and I'm like, I could have been you, But really, when being fortunate enough and blessed enough to go to Olympic and Paralympic Games, and Apolo, you're going to like this. It's in your realm. My favorite sport is long track speed skating, and because it reminds me of swimming. It's solitary. They train. Bonnie Blair is a good friend of mine, so we always talked about our taper, which is something swimmers do more than track and field in the short track. But to go to a ring where there's long track speed skating and there's a rhythm to their skates and there's a rhythm to what they're doing, and it reminds me of swimming on ice, and it's solitary and quiet, and I think it's beautiful.
Sarah?
Winter. I think I would totally do it different, get out of the sun from all those hours of riding my bike in Kona and Hawaii. So I think sometimes it would be nice to give my skin a break and be on a ski slope and be cold instead of hot. But I'm always intrigued by the summer games. I think it's the romanticism of it. I don't know if I really want to be that cold, but it is fun to watch the winter games.
And gymnastics for me, always been fascinated by it. My legs were just way too long, and I wasn't flexible, so it wasn't for me. But yeah, gymnastics.
Well, you mentioned Simone Biles, but let me ask you all the question: which Olympic athlete, outside of family or somebody you competed directly against, who do you admire the most? Who's an Olympic athlete who you've gotten to know or you've seen?
So many.
Yeah, for me it was. I don't know him very well, but Michael Johnson. He was just his unorthodox running style, track and field superstar. I look to him to be just incredible, and I just remember those gold shoes. Remember those gold shoes? How cool was that? Now everybody's got gold shoes. Even the guy who's didn't make the finals got gold shoes. And at the time, only Michael Johnson had gold shoes. So it was the coolest thing. And I think that probably spurred a whole generation of track and field athletes watching him. But there's superstars in every sport. I grew up watching Janet. It was. I think you take what you can from these incredible moments in time and you try to figure out why they're so great. The first time I met Matt Biondi, I was 9 or 10 years old, and he signed a swimming cap for me at this local swim competition. That memory I still hold today, and remembering that I was the last person in line, and this guy, he had been there for 3 hours as the last kid in line, and I was too scared to go up there and ask him, and he kind of looks up at me. He's like, "Come on, I'll sign it for you." And so, now when I'm in that position, I try to do the exact same. I think sports is it's awesome. You got to you receive, you give back, and it ever goes, and it just keeps on going on. But Michael Johnson was my favorite. Yeah.
I think working on the Los Angeles 2024 Olympic and Paralympic bid, I'm the director of athlete relations, and I'm fortunate enough to work with Jean almost day. I still get very, Michael Johnson works a lot with us, and I still get very intimidated by all of you because I can't believe that I'm one of you. I'm just a little girl from Orange County who swam really fast, and I still get starstruck. It is incredible. I have to call Carl Lewis, or I have to call Wes, Allyson's brother, and I'm still like, this is weird or Nadia, these are the people that I don't feel like they're peer. I feel like I'm still a little starstruck, and I think a lot of Olympians and Paralympians would tell you that, and I think that speaks to who we are as athletes. I think I've met a lot of athletes. They're all lovely, but there's no one like an Olympian or a Paralympian because and I think that's why we love the Olympics and Paralympics. There's a sense of humility that comes with these athletes for all of the things we've spoken about today, for representing our country, for realizing that there are going to be failures, for realizing that we're not always going to win, and we don't do it for contracts and glory. We do it because it's something we love. And I am in awe of all of these athletes that I'm fortunate enough to work with every single day, and some are more humble than others. Most are very, very humble, and those are the ones I love the most. So. And I interrupted you, Sarah.
No, I was just going to say, actually, I remember when I met Janet Evans, I was like 17 years old, and I was nervous to ask her for her autograph at a Women's Sports Foundation event, and I was like so awestruck. But I just kind of hook on to that, too. One of the athletes I never got to meet, but I think about her every day, is Florence Joyner, because part of the legacy of the 1984 Games is that I actually live in Orange County, and I get to pass the FloJo Park every day. I ride my bike on Olympiad. And so there's even athletes that I never got to meet, that their legacy and their legend lives on. And that's something that gets me so excited about the LA 2024 Games, because I feel the legacy from 1984, and it gets me so excited to think about what we're going to leave in this city for 2024, and the athletes, both present and future, that are going to continue to touch lives in this city and around the world.
Well, that is a great segue, I think, into just a pitch for the LA 2024 Olympic bid. First of all, thank you very much. It's been great to hear from you and have you tell us a bit about what it means to be an Olympic athlete. And I must say, the other thing you notice about all of them and all the people they said were their role models, they're all from Southern California. So Los Angeles is truly the home of the Olympics. And I'm going to put some slides up here, and then we're going to run a video, which is a video for our LA 2024 bid. But the slides will be, they'll show you what we did in 1984 and what we intend to do in 2024 if we're lucky enough to be selected. So in 1984, Peter Ueberroth ran the Olympic Games in 1984, the Los Angeles Olympic Games, but he likes to say almost none of the events were in Los Angeles. And when you take a look at this map, you begin to see that. And in fact, in 1984, many of the things that we think of as the Staples Center, et cetera, of the LA Olympic or sports infrastructure did not exist. And we have many things today that we didn't have in 1984. We'll have more by 2024 with the new stadium for the Rams and the Chargers being built in Inglewood. The sports arena site is now being turned into a football club stadium for the Bank of California football team. So there are lots of things that are coming to Southern California that make it very straightforward for us to be hosts of the Olympic Games. Let's go to the next slide, and you'll see this is a somewhat more compact plan for 2024. Who would have thought that as Los Angeles has expanded in 40 years, you could actually make the presentation of the games more compact? And someone might say, well, how do you get people around to these various places? Well, let's go back and look at what 1984 looked like in terms of mass transit in Los Angeles. That is one line. It's a train line, a rail line. And you can see otherwise you had to rely on freeways or the streets. But that's transforming as well. You'll see on the next slide. By 2024, the public transit system looks like the London subway map or the Paris metro, but better. And if you add to that where the venues will be, you can see that we've put things where people can get to. And in fact, the community has made it easier for us to host the Olympic Games. So when we make our argument to the people who make decisions about the Olympics, the members of the IOC, we have several things we can say. One is, this is the natural place for the Olympics. We have the best outdoor weather year-round in the world. We have more Olympic and Paralympic athletes who live and choose to train here. In fact, this really is the home of the Olympics in Southern California. We don't have to build anything. All of this stuff is coming on its own, not because we're building it and certainly not because we're paying for it. So it's very easy for us to host the Olympic Games here. And finally, if you're all here, you think about the theme of this conference and what it means to be here in Southern California. This really is the home of the future. This is where creativity, imagination, innovation all live very comfortably. And this is how we hope to bring the Olympics to the next generation of youth. This is the place to do it. So we're very excited to have that opportunity. We would appreciate your support. If you're Angelinos, for sure. If you're out-of-towners, talk to everybody else you know. And I'll play a short video, and thank you very much for your time.